Well, again, it's great to see you. So what I want to do, we maybe have a half an hour together, spend maybe 20 minutes talking to you about some aspects of the state of the school, and then take your questions. I think, one of the things that our community, particularly our alumni community, think about a lot are rankings. So I wanted to start with a discussion about rankings, our position in the rankings, and then talk to you more about our strategic plan, which we are implementing now, and how we think it addresses not just our position in the rankings, but how it allows us to advance our core mission. And so let me give you some data, show you some data first, and then happy to, again, later field questions, but talk to you a little bit about the rankings landscape. For now, I'll just focus on the full-time MBA program. I'll show you some of the other programs because we have representatives and alumni from the other programs in a moment. But in the full-time MBA program, if you look at our rankings over the last decade, you see largely decline across some of the rankings, although recent improvement in one. There are three major rankings for the full-time MBA program: U.S. News and World Report and Business Week are in order, the ones that our domestic applicants look at most closely. We have data that backs that up. And among our international applicants, Financial Times is the most commonly used ranking for making decisions about MBA programs. And you can see here that over the last decade, and this is probably something you're all familiar with, in U.S. News and World Report, we've declined from where we were a decade ago, and if you go even further back, our ranking was even higher. And in Business Week, you see a lot of volatility, and in Financial Times, at least recently, and in this last year, we've done very well. And so one question you might ask is, how can you simultaneously go up and down in different rankings? And it's because they measure different things. So the U.S. News and World Report, for example, puts a lot of weight on career outcomes for students. So what is their compensation when they graduate? What is the proportion of students who have accepted offers at graduation and 3 months post-graduation? So they're very outcomes focused. Business Week is focused on a lot of different things. They're interested in student and alumni satisfaction, about the quality of their learning experience, the quality of the alumni network. They're very interested in diversity. Whereas U.S. News and World Report doesn't look at that. Financial Times looks at a different set of metrics. They're the only ranking that looks at faculty research. And in fact, the reason we did very well in the Financial Times is that we ranked 5th in research productivity and impact worldwide. And the only schools ahead of us were Harvard, Chicago, I believe Stanford, and Columbia. But the other rankings don't look at that. So they look at different things. And as a consequence, you can have these things happening simultaneously. Now, I'll go through this relatively quickly. We have many programs here, and I'll go into a deeper dive into this in just a moment. But we have many other programs, not just the full-time MBA program. In our part-time MBA or fully employed MBA program, our ranking has been consistently around number 5 domestically. In the executive MBA program, it's been around 8 to 10 in U.S. News, and recently in Financial Times has gone up also significantly. This includes both our executive MBA and our NUS program, which is a dual degree program with the National University of Singapore. So improvements there. Some of you may not know this, but in the last 10 or so years, we've introduced 2 specialty master's programs, one in financial engineering and one in business analytics. In financial engineering, we have made some recent gains, and now we rank firmly in the top 10 on the 2 major rankings. MSBA is a new program that we initiated 7 years ago. You had to have 3 years of data to be rated, and we started out at number 2, and we stayed at number 2, and only MIT is in front of us. So the ratings for some of the other programs tell a somewhat different story than full-time MBA. So let's look at U.S. News and World Report. I think this is the one that most people focus on. It's the one that gets the most attention. So what I want to help you understand is how are the rankings determined? Why are our rankings not as strong as I think everybody believes the school is? Excuse me. U.S. News evaluates business schools on 4 subcategories. One is the peer assessment. How do other deans rank the other schools? It's recruiter assessment. How do recruiters assess the quality of our graduates? It's on student selectivity, and that is measured a couple of ways. What proportion of students do you admit? What's their average GMAT? What's their average GPA? And then finally, it's placement. And it's measured in the ways I described earlier. Placement at graduation, placement 3 months post, what's the average compensation? Now, what happened this year for us, which was unfortunate, is US News changed the methodology. So they put more weight on placement and less weight on the peer assessments and the recruiter assessments. The problem for us was they put more weight on the stuff we don't do as well and put less weight on the stuff we do well. I wish they would have consulted with me before they made that change. Okay, so if you look at this, we punch above our weight if our weight is whatever the ranking is in 3 of the categories, and below our weight in the placement. So what's going on here? There's many things going on, but I'm going to show you a graph that actually explains a lot. And you might be surprised by this, maybe you won't be surprised by this, but it actually explains a lot. And it's this graph here. What this graph shows is on the y-axis, what is the placement success rank? So not the overall rank of the school in US News. How did it do on the placement success measure, which is 50% of the weight? That's on the y-axis. On the x-axis, what is the percentage of graduates who go into consulting and finance? Okay, and that's the map. And what you see is a pretty clear pattern. If you place more of your students in consulting and finance, you do better on this measure. And why is that? Well, there's 2 reasons. For those of you who may remember this from your days, may not, consulting and finance tends to clear early. The labor market clears early. Those decisions, for example, this year have largely already been made. So why is that important? Well, when you measure placement at graduation and 3 months post-graduation, if you have a high proportion in consulting and finance, they've got their jobs. And that's favorable in US News. Also, they pay the best. So that's also favorable. And what you can see here is something very interesting. And by the way, this is not about, please don't take this to mean that, we're going to just try to explain everything away. What I'm trying to identify is diagnose the problem, and then what are we going to do to fix it? So this is not intended to be just a description of, hey, we're doing great here. This is so we understand the problem that has to be solved. So what you can see here is, I think, something that's kind of instructive. One is the schools in the top 20 that are the 3 lowest ranking schools on career placement are Stanford, UCLA, and Berkeley, okay? Stanford, you might look at this and, ignore us for a second. You might be surprised to say Stanford is 37th in terms of career placement. How is that possible? Stanford does, in the rankings, does really well on one thing. They have very, very high average compensation. They do very poorly on 2 other things. Their students don't take jobs at the times the US News wants them to. And why is that? Well, I'll talk about Stanford, but a very similar thing happens in other schools. But Stanford students, like UCLA students and many other students on the West, they like to wait for better opportunities, and if that's on their timetable, that's the way they're going to make the decision. And conversely, you look at some other schools, just to give you an example, Dartmouth, Tuck, ranks number 1 in placement with Chicago, and that's why now with the change in weights, that putting more weight on the career placement, Dartmouth moved up 5 spots, and and Stanford moved down 3. So this issue is really critical. Now, I want to take a moment to say, though, why, from a school's perspective, as a community perspective, that just because we've diagnosed the problem in terms of the rankings, why the solution isn't as obvious as you might think. The solution you might think is obvious is just put more people into consulting and finance, right? That just reorient the school towards consulting and finance. However, we do actually have some advantages as a school. and they may not be consulting and finance. That's not to say we can ignore this, but we have to think about fundamentally, where are our advantages? Where are we going to be distinctive? And perhaps just because the rankings say this is what you should do, you shouldn't necessarily do it. On the other hand, you can't ignore this, because if you ignore the rankings, you do it at your peril. Students look at this. Students care about this, and they should, because there are certain elements of this which are consistent with what their goals are. And so how do you square that? We have to think as a school, how can we be distinctive and have maximal impact? We have a mission here at Anderson and at UCLA to do largely three things. One is to create and disseminate knowledge. We're a great research university. It's to educate, and it's to serve the public. That's what we do, okay? And the rankings measure some of that, but not all of that. So here's, in a nutshell, the problem. We're a mission-driven school, so naturally we should pursue our mission, but the ability to pursue the mission depends in some part on the rankings, because that determines the quality of the students, the quality of the recruiters, the quality of the faculty, and that's kind of virtuous. So even though it may not track what our mission is, you have to pay a lot of attention to it, because you can't advance the mission without all of those inputs. So it's a complicated problem. It's not as simple as, well, just go down here, right? So how did we deal with this? So we went through a strategic planning process. And the strategic planning process wanted to kind of reconcile these two sets of forces. We have to think about what is special about us. What are our advantages? How are we going to have maximal impact in our core missions? At the same time, how do we improve in the rankings, which is an important component of advancing the mission? So without getting into a lot of details, let me just explain some of the main contours of the strategic plan, and then I'll talk about how we're executing on it in some ways, and then I'll open it up to questions. What we felt is, from a geographic standpoint, while we wanted to be dominant in Los Angeles, we didn't want to be a regional school. There was a lot of discussion among our community that why don't we just put all our cards in on, put all of our money in on Southern California and be a regional school. We felt this was very limiting. Many of the most impactful jobs in some of the areas that we want to be distinctive are not necessarily in Southern California. While we want to do really well here, there's many great opportunities. Our students, in order to have great impact and have the best opportunities possible, have to think beyond that. If you think, for example, in innovation, which is one of the areas we really want to be distinctive. Innovation, yes, there's a lot happening in Southern California. There's a lot happening in Northern California. There's a lot happening in Austin, Texas, Miami, but there's a lot happening in Tel Aviv, Shenzhen. Having a narrow sort of aperture here is, in our view, not going to enhance impact. On the industry side, what we recognized is we need to do more in the big three, and in particular, the big two, consulting and finance. However, that's not where necessarily we have the greatest possibility at distinction. What we felt was there were three areas where we could be not just good or very good, but the destination for students who are interested in careers in those areas: media, entertainment, and sports, real estate, and healthcare. And healthcare is a little bit of a leap for us. It's not a traditional area of strength, but we felt with the potential partnerships in UCLA Health, with the incredible dynamism in healthcare innovation in Southern California, with the fact that we're a great public university and our students and faculty and staff should be trying to address large societal problems. It's hard to think of bigger societal problems than improving care, improving access, and lowering cost. So for those reasons, we felt this was a very, very natural place for us to place our bets. So when we think about this, it looks like it's contradictory. You want to do this and you want to do this. You can't do everything. Well, it's not, I wouldn't say so. I think what we're thinking is we need to place about 70% of our students in the big three: tech, consulting, and finance, maybe 20% in these other three in aggregate. So we're talking about 20, 25 students per year into these different areas. And in particular, look for points of intersection. So for example, healthcare consulting and healthcare finance are fast-growing areas. Entertainment finance is a fast-growing area, so on. So look for those points of intersection. At the same time, we asked recruiters, we asked our community, when you look for MBA graduates, what are you looking for? And then we asked ourselves, what are the kind of skills that we should be developing in our curriculum and our co-curricular activities? And then we created this flywheel that you see here that has really, broadly speaking, two sets of components. The first side, think of it as the left-hand side of this, is around being able to analyze complex business problems, being able to analyze and diagnose complex business problems. What does that require? You have to understand the industry context really well. So we have to teach courses on, for example, if we're going to do healthcare as a priority, what is the context for evolving business models in healthcare, all of the frictions associated with that. They need to understand that kind of landscape. Students need to understand the transformative effects of tech and data in virtually every industry and every role. If you haven't used ChatGPT, for example, if you look at the implications of ChatGPT in health, in education, in almost any industry, they're just staggering. They're incredibly staggering, and not preparing our students to understand how those technologies are going to change virtually every role in every industry is a disservice really to the students. They have to be analytically adept. They have to understand how to work with data. They have to understand how data and data analysis can inform decisions. So you have to be able to understand and diagnose. You also have to be able to catalyze action. It's not just enough to know, hey, here's the problem. How do you get an organization to act? How do you get it to move forward? How do you lead inclusively? How do you motivate a diverse workforce? How do you create a purposeful organization, an ethical organization? And how do you persuade? All of these things that once you've diagnosed and once you've set a course helps develop capabilities that will allow students to actually catalyze action in an organization. And a lot of curriculum innovation that we're doing is around building these capabilities. So, there was one other slide. It looks like it's missing, but let me just speak through it. What are some of the things that we're doing that will help in all of these ways that I described? Well, very, very significant curriculum changes. One example of that, many of you probably remember your field studies. That was the way you satisfied your sort of thesis or capstone requirement. We've created a number of new capstone alternatives that are intended to do three things. One is advance career preparedness in key areas. Two, to advance as many of these characteristics as possible. And three, to be multidisciplinary. That is, as much as possible, have teams that are not just teams necessarily of business school students from the MBA program, but use talent from across the school and potentially other parts of the campus. So curriculum innovations that help build this. On the career side, for the first time, we've created a role that's about enhancing employer relations. And what we found is we needed to reinvest in the community and the recruiter community, find key organizations that are great opportunities for our students, go through our alumni network, and we'll be reaching out to many of you to find champions in those organizations so that we can create opportunities for our students. But at the same time, we can learn from you. What is it that you would like to see when you are hiring an MBA student so that we can change our curriculum and co-curricular activities to develop that? We've done that as a school episodically, but we need to do that kind of in a continuous way because those kinds of skills are changing all the time. So it's kind of a two-way relationship that we are trying to build. On the alumni side, we believe that the alumni community is going to be incredibly important in developing all of these priorities, advancing all these priorities. For example, if we want to develop opportunities in healthcare or entertainment, we really need to create affinity groups among our alumni who advance their own interests, but then we can count on to enhance the learning experience of our students, whether it's through mentoring and advising, or giving guest lectures, or in the ways that Jill just mentioned. Maybe there's an internship opportunity, or maybe there's some way that you can help our students advance their careers. At the same time, initiatives like lifelong learning are going to, we believe, greatly enhance the value of your relationship with Anderson and fundamentally change the nature of the value proposition we offer students. It's not just going to be the 2 years you're here. We're going to be here whenever you have a career change, whenever there's a skill that maybe you wish you would have spent more time on in the MBA program, or maybe it's a skill that didn't even exist in the program. It was something we didn't even think about because it's a new technology or a new managerial issue that wasn't as salient at the time you took your degree. But we need to be there for you throughout your careers. And one of the great things that we learned in the last couple of years is that through the use of technology, we can access our large alumni community. We can do it effectively and do it at a relatively low cost, and we think create incredible value for you. And hopefully through that kind of a deeper alumni engagement, you can help us with all these different priorities, because we view this as a very symbiotic system. So I can speak much more about this, but I think I'll stop because I'd like to hear from you. So this is a little bit about the challenges we face, the analysis we did to kind of diagnose the problem and what we believe is the appropriate solution. But let me just end by reminding you that our North Star has to be about creating impact in these critical areas of advancing knowledge, educating, and serving the public. That is what we do at UCLA. That's why we all want to be part of this incredible community. How do we have impact in that? And as I mentioned, there are multiple ways of measuring that impact, and we have to be sensitive to that. But I feel very, very firmly that that's where we have to focus our attention in terms of doing what we're here to do, but being mindful of all the different forces that impact our ability to do that well. So I'll stop there and happy to take any questions. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Russell Deacon, class of 93. Thank you very much, Tony, for your comments. There's one thing when I look at the jobs that's, I think, missing, and perhaps we as a university need to discuss with US News and others. And I think that is the fact there's a lot of people, especially in California and UCLA and other universities here, that are very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
So we choose not to take a job. We find our own companies, which I've done, and went on a career in terms of private equity, venture capital, etc. So we turned down Wall Street. I used to work for Wall Street before I went to business school. Then I came here, had many good moments at the Entrepreneurial Center. Al Osborne, Bill Cochran opened up my eyes and said, I turned down loads of jobs, including from Bill Cochran.
Is he still mad at you?
I was one of the lucky ones, trust me. There are many things I did not know, but I got the A+ in the class, and he gives the job.
Yeah, no.
So that's not reflective, and that's the future. And so we got to change that. This is the 1980s.
So I agree with you. I mean, so a few points on this. Some of the rankings look at this. So for example, there's an entrepreneurship index in the Business Week ranking. US News ignores it. The way US News deals with it is they say, if you're going to start a company, we're not going to include you in the proportion of students who are seeking a job. And so that's one way to deal with it. But I would argue, there's a larger societal value there that you might want to treat it differently. I will say, when it comes to influencing the rankings, I'll say this very briefly. First of all, if you talk to different deans, they will tell you, move it in this direction or the other direction. So if you're like Anderson and we have a strong reputation in entrepreneurship, you say, do more entrepreneurship. The other dean says, we don't have a good entrepreneurship program, but we have a great whatever program, and so there's never a consensus. But by the way, the reason US News changed the ranking this year was in response to the law schools and the medical schools dropping out of the rankings. And what they did is they said, okay, a lot of schools complained that Yale was perennially #1 ranked among the deans. A lot of deans complain that's not fair. They're just resting, deans don't really know what's going on at Yale. And so they lower the thing. And as a consequence, they made those changes because they were worried about this a lot of schools and a lot of different graduate programs dropping out of the rankings. So again, I mean, we can harp, and I do, trust me, about what they measure, how they measure, and so on. And I would love, frankly, to live in a world where we could just pursue our mission without constraint. We do try to influence the publications, but they're getting, as I said, influenced in a lot of different directions. But I really want to be careful about chasing the rankings because, as you can see, they change the weights, they change what they measure. What if we reorient the school to solve the problem we think here, and it's like whack-a-mole, and then it pops up over there? That's not the way to run a great organization. On the other hand, you can't ignore it. Yeah.
Tony, real quickly, if you talk to the Anderson students and ask them why they chose Anderson, if you talk to the Anderson students and ask them why they chose Anderson, my guess is a lot of them went because of some of the entrepreneurship, the giving back. I mean, the world's changing. And so, and I feel the strength isn't to really have folks go out into financial services and consulting, go out and make an impact in all these other areas. And I think, so I'd be really interested to know the students that are here and why they chose, because my guess is a lot of them didn't come here because of the ranking. So
great question. Two pieces to this. There are many, because obviously there are many individuals, but two general themes. I've been here at Anderson 29 years, 25 years on the faculty, and now the last 4 as dean. The biggest change in the students, no, not even close. They want purposeful careers. They want to have positive social impact. That is absolutely true. Secondly, one of the things that is great to come to a place like UCLA, sometimes people are looking to understand where they want to go. Like we call them career switchers, but they're people who want to be exposed to a lot of different opportunities. This is a great place to do that. You can pursue financial services and consulting, but you can pursue entertainment, real estate, clean tech, fintech, health. And so students who want to understand what the possibilities are, this is a great place. It's also an incredible city. It's very diverse and dynamic and innovative. So there are a lot of reasons why people come here, not necessarily reflected here. A sort of a canonical example that I like to think about, which demonstrates the conflict. I mentioned about social impact. Let's suppose we got an applicant who wrote in their essay, I want to come to business school because I want to lead a nonprofit organization that's going to improve access to care in underserved communities. Suppose that's the essay. And it's, okay. If I'm US News, if I look at that graph there, the answer is no, right? But what are we doing here? That's exactly what we have to be doing here. Who wants to be part of a community who's not going to advance that person's interests? That's where you see it gets. It's actually, to me, it's not difficult. It's so easy. But
that's where we can differentiate ourselves relative to somebody else.
And so the question is, how do you balance these two things, right? You have to be mindful, but you have to do what is essentially us. And where is that balance? When I talk to some people, they think, you got to go all the way to the rankings. There's other people who say just ignore them completely and then everything in between. I can tell you as dean, it is the most challenging part of the job.
Tony, one last question.
Oh, okay.
Select well, I don't know.
In the very back, yep.
My name is Gigi.
Hi, Gigi. I can't see that far anymore.
Hello, Tony. Nice to see you. We see growth in programs, which is really fabulous in this beautiful new building. And we've grown by adding programs. Can you talk a bit about the cyclical nature of the MBA, what's happening with applicant pool, and what's coming with the downslide of undergraduate admissions?
Okay, great. Good to see you, Gigi.
Nice to see you, too.
You can tell I've been here 20, I can't even see all the way to the back now. I didn't even know there were people there until you asked the question. Okay, so there's a lot there, but So for those of you who don't know, I'll be very quick about this, and this is the problem of a short presentation. Since 2013, applications to in-residence 2-year MBA programs have been in decline, not just at Anderson, everywhere. And it's been pretty substantial. The last 2 years in particular, and particularly for domestic students. So if you look at domestic applicants to 2-year in-residence MBAs, even at the top 20, they're down dramatically. I'm talking in the last 2 years, 30% or so, even at Harvard, you name it. It's down significantly. Why is that? Well, some of you will understand why. It got really expensive. Some of you came here and it wasn't. Some of you came here and it was. And I hope that isn't a source of friction. It just is the way the world evolved. It got very expensive. And not just the cost of getting the degree, but leaving the workforce is a large opportunity cost. There's been a big switch in interest towards specialized master's programs, shorter programs, year-long programs, and we introduced 2, and I mentioned them, financial engineering and business analytics. And in a way, that's really helped us as a school because demand for those programs has grown. We've grown those programs, and by the way, one of the things we're doing as a school, because of the reduced number of applicants, we lowered the class size to 300 for the coming year from 360 2 years ago. And the reason is we need to make sure we have excellent students here, and if the applicant pool is declining, you can't continue to have the same class size and expect the same level of excellence that we want to achieve. So that ability to have a diversified set of programs has been really valuable for the school, and there's incredible impact that's being made by our students in these other programs. So we're thrilled to be able to do that. But the landscape for business education is changing rapidly. It's changing particularly through the use of technology. I don't know if you know this, but the University of Illinois, as an example, and that was traditionally a school that was, say ranked around 25 to 30, very, very good public university, ended its in-residence MBA program and now does an online MBA that teaches 6,500 students a year. That's about the same as all the top 20 combined. And they're doing it for $23,000 a year, whereas, we charge $65,000 a year. Stanford and Harvard and others charge $75,000 or more. So there's an incredible amount of disruption. Technology is fundamentally transforming, as I mentioned earlier, every industry. AI, as I said earlier, if you look at some of the applications of ChatGPT right now in education, you will be absolutely shocked, and it's only going to get better. And so there's all kinds of changes afoot, and so we're thinking about this through instructional design, new technology, lifelong learning. How are we going to adapt to an incredibly fast-changing environment? I'm going to be in various meetings throughout the day, and if I see you, I'm happy to talk about any of the things that you might like to talk about. I'm sure we could spend the rest of the day here, but you have other things to do, including having lunch, which is really important. But I'm really grateful you're all here. I want to just end by saying again how the alumni community is at the nexus of many of the things that we're trying to accomplish at a school. And I think it's incumbent upon us, and Jill mentioned some of the initiatives that we have, to give you more reason to engage with the school, okay? We can't be passive and just say, please engage. We have to create ways that make it valuable to you to engage. And I hope that if we do that, and I believe we will, that you will engage and help us advance what I think are really impactful priorities going forward. So thank you all.
Thank you.